Today we have an extra special video for you. Not only are we going to show you how to wood burn and customize this beer caddy, we partnered with Rob from DIY Dad Workshop to show you exactly how to build it. So let's head over to Rob's workshop and see how he made this caddy.
Good morning guys, Rob from DIY Dad Workshop. I haven't been in the shop for a while, but today we decided to come back in because we're going to do a collaboration with Ikonart on some holiday builds, things that you can do for the great gift ideas. What we're going to be working on today is a beer caddy. This is one of my most popular items. I like it so much, and why I think I gravitate towards it is it's an easy build. You can batch out 3 or 4 of them in a matter of an hour and a half or so. And I think with Ikonart's custom-made stencil kit, you can really decorate them and personalize them so they'd be a really unique gift. The cool thing about these is that not only are they good for the holidays, but I usually bring these to any backyard barbecues that I attend. It's almost always the talk of the party. So let's take a look and see how we can make them. Real simple build. Usually takes me about, let's say 45 minutes or an hour to build one of them. But again, you can build like 3 or 4 of them in an hour and a half. So let's take a look. So these are the dimensions we're working with. You'll see I've designed the front and back to be 5 3/4 oriented horizontally, and the sides to be 5 3/4 oriented vertically. This will enable the sides and the back to come together without any gaps. You have 9 1/2 for the front and the back, and then you'll have 5 3/4 up, and then an angle to 6 1/2 going to the very top of 2 inches where the handle will get inserted. We're not going to talk about the bottom slats right now because those are really going to be cut to fit. Depending on the thickness of the wood that you use, I'm not going to give you the dimensions on there, but rather I'll show you how they're installed later in the video. So with these dimensions in mind, you should be able to make the beer caddy out of a 44-inch piece by 5 3/4 piece of wood, which is a very common piece of wood that I almost always have lying around the shop. That excludes the bottom and the handle. If you take a look here on the bottom, what I did is I did 1-inch strips on the sides and then a 2-inch strip in the center. It's just more of a design element, but probably at the time that's what I had lying around, and it really worked out nice and it made it look aesthetically pleasing. The handle, which we'll talk about later in the video, I did with a contrasting wood. So the handle on this one is made out of mahogany. And again, it was just a scrap piece that I had lying around, but you can utilize any different type of wood that you have there, and we'll talk more about those dimensions as we show you the build. So this is a 44-inch piece of wood that I had lying around. I start off by cutting the 2 sides and then cutting the 2 9 1/2 pieces for the front and the back. Once I have all my pieces, I take the 2 side pieces and I find the center point. I come off 1 inch from either side of the center point, which makes the 2-inch width of the handle. And then I come out on an angle to where 5 3/4 comes up from the bottom of the side pieces. From there, I cut the angle pieces on each of the sides. I'm using 2 different saws here to demonstrate that it doesn't matter what kind of saw you have at home. Anything can be used to cut those side angles. At this point, I go on to sanding the sides, the front, and the back. I clean up all the edges, making sure there are no burrs, so when I'm assembling it, nothing is preventing us from getting nice, tight joints. Alright, so now up to the fun part. We're going to actually start assembling everything that we prepped so far. The way we assemble it is we're going to be using wood glue and a pin nailer. You don't have to use the pin nailer. You can actually use nails and a hammer. The nails really are just going to hold it in place until the glue sets. The glue is really the thing that bonds it all together and offers the integrity to hold the bottles. So here we go. Cleaning up the glue now as you're assembling the unit will save you a ton of time later when you're doing the final sanding. After you have it all glued up and tacked together with nails, you're going to want to get some clamps on all the edges This way you have nice, tight joints. While this is drying, I'm going to start looking for what wood we're going to use for the bottom and the handle. I start by cutting the 3 strips for the bottom. Now I'm off to the handle. I start off with a 2-inch wide piece of wood. I find the center point, 1 inch, and then I mark a 1/2 inch to the left and to the right of that center point. Then I draw a vertical line down the length of the piece of the wood, and then what I do is come 1 inch off of each side and draw a perpendicular line. From there I use a spray paint can cap, and I scribe the arc of the cap from that 1 inch point to the 1/2 inch lines that run down the length of the piece of wood. I call this a dog bone handle design. I utilize the saw to cut the dog bone out, and then I'm back to sanding. Now let's go tack in the dog bone handle and also the bottom pieces. So now that we let the glue dry for about 45 minutes, we're going to take apart all the clamps and we're going to run the sander on it one more time just to kind of level out any of the joints that maybe weren't exactly lined up. So let's start doing that. Alright, so for all intents and purposes, this build is done now. If you wanted to take it now and stencil the sides, you'd have a perfectly fine project. I like to take it to the next level. What we're going to do is we're going to do 2 different things. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add boiled linseed oil, or you can use tung oil. What that's going to do is that's going to penetrate the wood and really give it depth and give it a lot of, you'll be able to see the grain so much nicer. I really think that this is like a step that really takes it from being good to being great. After that dries, we're gonna end up doing shellac, spray shellac. It dries very quickly. That's gonna give it a top coat. It's also gonna seal it, which is great because when you stencil it, then the paint is not going to run through the grain. So we're gonna take time now and we're gonna add the boiled linseed oil. We're gonna give that a little time to dry and then we're gonna shellac it. Here we go. Alright, so now that we've given the shellac some time to dry, what I like to do is I'd like to take 000 steel wool and just lightly rub it off. What I'm doing here is really just trying to knock down any bumps that may be caused by dust that was captured under the shellac. I don't want to do it too hard because I'm not looking to take the shellac off, but rather just clean up and make it feel real smooth. This whole process should take all of 2 minutes. The last thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add our bottle opener to the side of the beer caddy. I'm going to line it up as close to the top as possible so that this way, if you're opening a bottle, you don't hit the table if it's sitting down flat. I get these bottle openers off of Amazon. I think I get 15 of them for 18 bucks, so they're relatively inexpensive. They're cast iron. They say open here on there. They're kind of neat. I think it adds to the aesthetic. So we're going to start by drilling a couple of pilot holes. The one thing I want to caution you is the screws that come with the bottle opener are very long. So depending on the thickness of the wood that you're using for the sides, you may have to cut these. They're really easy to cut. I use a pair of wire linesmen. And I'll kind of line up where I want it and just snap that shut. Let's do the next one. But I want to also tell you a trick that I do is because I'm cutting the screws and because the wall is thin, I'm going to take a little bit of CA glue and put it underneath the bottle opener to kind of help it from being ripped off the side if somebody puts too much pressure on them. drops right into the hole and the screws are going to go. Pop that bad boy in. One of the questions I get often on my website is if I install the dividers for the beer bottles. These dimensions will accommodate dividers to be put in there. I stopped doing it. I stopped doing it because it was functional when I would bring the craft beer to a party or whatnot, but afterwards they never really utilized it as a beer caddy again. What I did find, a lot of the people that I did make them for were utilizing it for plastic forks, knives, and napkins when they would have like a barbecue or some sort of get together outside. So I stopped inserting them in there so that this way it can be utilized afterwards in a different fashion. You can install them, but just not adhere them so they can be removed afterwards. But again, the bottles fit in there pretty good. They do rattle when you're bringing it over, but again, when you're presenting the gift, I don't see that to be an issue. And again, I found that most people remove the center dividers so that this way they can utilize the caddy for a different purpose afterwards. So this build is now done. We're going to ship it over to Ikonart and let them decorate both the front and the back and possibly the sides. Let's see how they do with that. I look forward to seeing what you guys build.
Thank you, Rob, for that great tutorial. You make it look so easy. Now let's see just how easy it is to add our own design using an Ikonart stencil.
So the first thing you have to do is, of course, print your artwork. I'm using this very high detailed art that I bought online. So I want to make sure to print as dark as possible because there are a lot of fine lines. And then we are going to use our purple stencil film today. It is a little bit stickier, so it works great on wood. So I'm just layering my stencil film with the texture side up and then my artwork, and using my cover sheet to really press down and seal that artwork to my stencil film so that there's no air or light getting underneath my artwork. And then I'm just going to expose for the 35 seconds. And after it's done exposing, I just like to soak my stencil for a little bit, about a minute, in warm water. Just need a little bit of water. And that just helps to soften the emulsion, and it makes washout go a lot quicker. So after that, I'm just using my trigger jet nozzle to wash off my stencil and make sure all of my mesh openings are clear. Then once my stencil is all washed out, I just hold it up to a window and make sure that all of my openings are washed out. If I would see any emulsion in any of my openings, I would just take it back to the sink and finish washing it out before drying my stencil. So this stencil is looking really good, so I'm ready to dry it. You just blot off the excess water, and then you can either air dry it, leave it hanging in the window. We're going to use our film dryer today. You can use an food dehydrator or even a hair dryer on low heat. Then once it is completely dry, you just pop it back under your exposure light for 2 minutes, and this just finishes hardening the emulsion and makes the stencil more durable. All right, now that our stencil is made, we can add our design to our beer caddy. So I'm actually going to be sanding down one of the sides with 220 grit sandpaper, and this is to remove that coating that Rob had added. Because I'm going to be wood burning this with torch paste, I really want it to be the raw wood. If you were going to be adding your design with paint or chalk paste, then you could just leave that coating on there and it works as a great barrier to the wood. But because I want the torch paste to actually burn the raw wood, I sanded off that coating. All right, so I made my stencil a little bit oversized so that it would hang off the edges. I wanted a full bleed design on the front of my caddy. So I'm just adding my torch paste to my stencil and then using my squeegee to pull the paste across my stencil, making sure it gets into all of the mesh openings. And I'm just gliding it over the top, kind of like buttering bread. I'm not pushing too hard. I don't want my stencil to buckle, but I'm pushing hard enough to get it in the openings and make it stick to the wood that's underneath. So now I'm just scraping off all the excess. I don't want any lines on there, any extra torch paste. And then I slowly remove my stencil, and I call this the lift and look method. So I'm just looking at my design as I'm lifting off my stencil, and if any areas would need more torch paste, I would lay down my stencil before completely removing the design. But this looks great, and now I am ready to wood burn. So we use this Seek 1 heat gun, 1800 watts. We recommend at least 1000 watts, and we do ours on the highest heat. As I wood burn my design, I keep my heat gun moving. I don't stay in any one spot for too long because I don't want the raw wood behind my design to burn or darken before my design does. There will be a few different factors in how quickly your wood burns. First is the type of wood. Each type of wood is going to burn a little bit differently. Secondly, it will depend on if you have a coating or not. As you saw, I sanded off my coating, but if your wood is treated with anything, it could inhibit the torch paste from burning. So that will also affect it. And then, of course, your heat gun and the quality of your heat gun and the strength of your heat gun. So you just have to have some patience with this part of the process. It can take a little bit of time to get the torch paste heated up, but once it starts changing colors, then it generally goes pretty quick after that. So of course I sped up this part of the process for the sake of this video so it didn't get super long, but this larger piece took me about 6 or 7 minutes to wood burn. I also recommend having your wood on a surface that is heat safe, either a silicone pad or cement or some kind of surface that won't get ruined with high heat. I have definitely melted some carpet and warped my filming backdrop, so just be careful with that. But the extra time is definitely worth it. In the end, you have a custom wood burned piece, and the wood burning is actually part of the wood versus paint that sits on top of the wood, and it just looks really cool.
And that's all there is to it. You could easily do the same thing with paint. You don't need to wood burn. There are so many possibilities to make these custom and unique birthday gifts, Father's Day gift, Mother's Day gift, anniversary presents, housewarming gift. The possibilities are endless. So if you use Rob's tutorial and make a beer caddy, make sure to tag us so that we can see it. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments and have a great day.